Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kembali lagi di kelas bahasa Inggris bersama Miss Dwi. Okay, today's topic is about short story, which is a part of narrative text. So let's get started. The first is, what is narrative text? Narrative is a kind of text that aims to entertain and amuse the readers, that deals with complications or problematic events which led to a crisis and in turn find a resolution. Actually, narrative text is a fiction text. Okay, next is, what is short stories? Short stories is an example of narrative text which is shorter than novels because they usually only tell about one incident. Like novels, short stories entertain and amuse the readers. Okay, the structure of narrative text or short stories can be included uh, for structures. The first one is orientation. Orientation is an introduction about the story, when, where, who, and what are involved in the story is described and explained in this part. The second structure is complication. It tells the beginning of the problem which leads to the crisis or climax for the main participants. So it contains the conflict, the problem of the story, like that. And after complication, the story usually have the resolution, or it can be called the third structure, which contains the resolution of the problem or the crisis, and it may be a happy ending or a sad or tragic ending. The last structure is reorientation. Reorientation usually contains a closing remark from the story, or it contains moral or advice from the writer, like that. That the structure of the short stories of or narrative text. The next one is language features. There are some language features that used in this short stories or narrative text. The first is, this text usually absolutely use nouns because it tells about something. Of course, it have to have nouns. And the second is pronouns because it have characters, so the pronouns is usually used. The third one is noun phrase, and then time connective and conjunctions, because this story is told in chronological, so the connectives, the time connective and the conjunction is really needed because it is helpful for the readers to know step by step of the story, like that. Next one is adverbs and adverbial phrases. Okay, it usually used to describe more about the verb and the activity from the characters that are told in the story. Okay, the next language features, it usually use action verbs, of course, because the characters absolutely do something in the story. So the action verbs and the saying verbs, the next one is really needed to describe how the story happened. And then next is direct and indirect speech. Direct and indirect speech is needed when the characters are communicate each others, like that. The characters need a sentence which can describe their dialogue, their emotion is using direct and indirect speech. And then the last one is the past tense use. The past tense use because the narrative text, or this in this case a short story, is told because the story have happened, like that the story have been passed, and so the writer need to use the past tense. There are three past tense that usually use: the simple past tense, the past continuous, and then the past perfect. There are some example that you can read by yourself. And then the next one is the elements of short story. There are some elements of short story. The first one is characters. So the characters is a writer describes them by picturing their appearance and or explaining their behavior or feelings, as well as having other characters talking about them. So the characters is someone or people that involved in the story, people that experience the problem, that experience what is happening in the story. It called the characters. The next one is settings. Settings is time and place that the story happened, where, when, in what time, for example, in what situation, and in which country, in which city, for example, like that. The next one is plots. Plots is, in a short story, the plot is usually use just one flow, because the readers can finish it in one sitting, like that. When the plot in short story, when the plot use more than one flows or more than one plots, it really it can be longer, and it can be done in one sitting, so it can be called short story, like that. A part has four essential parts. The first one, introduction, rising action, falling action, and result of a situation. This is like a diagram that describe about a plot from the start until the end. So from the introduction, and then go up into the rising action, which contains conflict and will be ends in a climax. And then after climax, there will be a falling action, which can be called anticlimax. In this anticlimax, the resolution is happen, the problem is resolved, and then will be ending by a resolution or reorientation, which contains the writer's moral value or the writer's opinion from the story, like that. Okay, the next elements of the story is conflict. Of course, the short story or the narrative text is having this element, because when the narrative text or the short story doesn't have conflict, it can be called narrative text. So narrative text always have a conflict. The conflict either can be an external conflict or internal conflict. External conflict is a conflict which a force outside oneself. It means that the conflict happen between the characters and other elements. For example, like others characters or the situation outside, like that. And then the internal conflict is the conflict within oneself, the conflict that happen in the characters itself, the characters and it itself only, like that. Okay, the next element is is theme. Theme is something that the writer wants to deliver to the readers. Can be seen from the title and may be represented through the use of figures of speech. So theme can be known when you are finished the reading of the story. You can get what is the theme from the story. Okay, the next one is the last but not least is point of view. Point of view, or how the writers tell the story. The common use are the first person and the third person. The first person, it means that the writers will be the characters from the story, while the third person is the writers only like the other the other person which outside the story, but she or he or she knows really well about the story, like that. The next one is types of narrative text. This is usually used also genre. There are some genre or types like folk tales, fable, fairy tales, legend, myth, science fiction, and many more. And then these are two examples of the short story or narrative text. The first one is Mr. Fogg and Mrs. Crow. You can read by yourself, and then you may analyze about the generic structure of or the text structure, and then the elements, of course, you may analyze by yourself. And this one is also, you may done it the same, the countryman's son. Okay, this is the other example of short story or narrative text. Okay guys, that's all about the short story or narrative text. You can read it again or watch my video again if you can get what my explanation mean, but I hope that you can understand it. That's all from me. Thank you. If there's still question, you may ask it to me. Okay, thank you. Good luck. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.